Once again, Swamini Svatmavidyananda, welcome to the Yoga Hour. I'm really delighted you could join us today to discuss your book, Overcoming Self-Sabotage in Self-Knowledge, Insights from the Upanishads. I did want to mention to listeners that I know you and Yogacharya O'Brien, the founder of this podcast and our spiritual director, have really lovely connection as spiritual friends. As most of our listeners know, Yogacharya O'Brien is the founder and spiritual director also of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment in San Jose, California. And I think many listeners to this show also may attend the 6:30 a.m. Pacific Time daily meditation at the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment and are then familiar with the Dakshinamurti, the statue that is the focus for our morning prayers and offerings. And I wanted to mention that that statue came to CSE as a gift from you and your ashram, which I think is just it's a lovely connection. For those who are unfamiliar with him, Dakshinamurti is a representation of Shiva as the teacher of all teachers, the first and ultimate guru, and the embodiment of all happiness. Today, we're going to be discussing your teachings that come from the Upanishads and how we can use those teachings in our modern day lives. So let's begin with one of the terms from your title, self-knowledge. Would you define self-knowledge for our listeners?
Certainly, self-knowledge is basically the knowledge of oneself, not the things that come and go, but that which is constant.
Mhm.
Things that I reckon under the rubric of self includes the body, the mind, the senses, the possessions, feelings, thoughts, so many things. But all these are eminently changeable.
Mhm.
And because they are changing all the time, catching on to any of them as the self is problematic. It causes a misidentification and makes one subject to grief, fear, anger, etc. So when we look at the self in what is called Vedanta or the Upanishads, which are synonymous. Vedanta, that which comes at the end of the Vedas, this knowledge, it's merely a locational name, which are also the Upanishad. Which Upanishad means that which gets rid of all the things, a host of sorrows that you do not want, and
Mhm.
that which makes sure that it doesn't come back. It's not just gone briefly. Like you spray something on a weed killer and then it's gone and then it comes back 2 months later. Ta-da, I'm here. Not like that. This is gone.
Right.
And it brings you to yourself. And that is the self of the self knowledge we talk about, that
Mhm.
which never changes. And that if this self is outside of me, then there is no way I can understand it. It will have to be another belief based tradition. But it
Mhm.
does not happen to be so, because one is always in touch with the self. It is One is always experiencing it, and one is always with it. And if I ask you the question, are you here? What would you say?
Yes, I'm here.
Exactly, exactly. So the question is a little surprising. So the answer takes a split second to come. But you are here. It is an undeniable presence. It's a
Yeah.
non negatable presence that is always constant.
Yes.
And it is existent, it is conscious, because that's what makes you say, yes, I am here. Because when you say, yes, I'm here, you're saying two things. You're certifying your existence and you're certifying the knowledge of your existence. And that knowledge of your existence is inextricably linked with the existence.
Yes.
And how long does this knowledge continue? All the time. Are you
Yes.
here now? Yes. Now? Yes. Now? Yes. And how? What is the length of now? You can't measure it. It's timeless. And this is what is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat, I am. Chit, I know I am. And that knowing is an ontological knowing which never becomes I do not know.
Mm.
Even if I say I do not know the Mandarin language, what I'm saying is I know I do not know Mandarin.
That's right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it is limitless. It is all pervasive. And it
Mhm.
is in the form of this consciousness, this awareness that we call the self. And that self, in the Upanishads, in the primary texts of the Hindu tradition, this self is equated with God, Ishvara, the cause of the universe. And
Mhm.
so understanding myself to be non separate from this Ishvara is self knowledge.
Mm. No, it's beautiful. What a, what a beautiful exposition of self-knowledge. I did want to mention for listeners who may not be familiar with Vedanta that Vedanta is one of the six classical schools of philosophy that come from ancient India, and that another of the six schools is yoga. So both of these traditions, both of these philosophical systems go back, what is it, thousands of years, and originally came from ancient India. In your book, you write, and I just love your the way that you phrase this here. You say, Vedanta is a body of knowledge that reveals the truth of oneself as whole, limitless, and free. Vedanta is a body of knowledge that reveals the truth of oneself as whole, limitless, and free. The subject matter of self-knowledge is wholly in keeping with the universal human quest to be free of the notion that one is bound by fear, sorrow, or alienation. For this reason, Vedanta is not a property of India or the Hindu tradition. For humans everywhere who wish to discover their nature as free and joyful beings, this knowledge is like a much anticipated rain shower, filling the doubt-ridden cracks of self-ignorance and healing addictive behavioral and thought patterns. I just love that. The knowledge is like a much anticipated rain shower. I just thought that was so beautiful. So, as you've already mentioned, your book begins with the point that we already actually are that which we seek. As you write here, whole, limitless, and free. And yet
Yes.
we identify more with the changing body and mind. That is always, it's always interesting to reflect on that, to say, oh, we already are that. We are that which we seek. Why is that so difficult? Why do we forget all the time and identify more with our changing body and mind?
It's not that we forget, because it's in keeping with so much, one craves to be that. It is that it is a question of what happens when there is partial knowledge. It
Mm.
is the partial knowledge of the rope as something lying in the twilight with three bends that makes one mistake it for a snake.
Right.
I know there is something there, but I don't know what there is. Fortunately, we have the cell phone, and the cell phone has a flashlight, and then I shine the light on this snake, and then I can see that, oh, it was a mistaken assumption,
Right.
a misapprehension due to lack of light. So I know that there is something, but I do not know what it is. And so that not knowing what it is fully makes it a cause of fear and
Mm.
terror, maybe even sorrow, whatever it is. So too with the self. You cannot say, I don't know that I exist, because we just went through the question, are you here? And you said yes. So you cannot say, I don't know I am, because you said, I just know I am. I am here, you said. You
Yes.
ratified your own existence as a self-conscious being and a self-aware person. This everybody can do, and everybody does this. But then, please do not ask the next question, who are you? That is what we call self ignorance. I know I am, but I do not know what I am or who I am. And a partially known I becomes the sitting duck for identification with everything finite, feelings, fears, sorrow, tears, all these things. I am as good as my accomplishments. That is a misapprehension. I am as good as what I possess. I am as good as how many people follow me. And nowadays you can follow in so many ways on Twitter and all these things. A young girl came to me. She was about 12. And she said, she came to me and she said, can you please like me on Facebook? I don't have a Facebook account. And so I told her, I said, I can tell you I like you on your face. Why go to Facebook? but that's that's where we are, the sense of incompleteness and the sense that I don't belong. Nobody loves me. And in order to fix all this, I have to become better. I have to get more things. I have to get more degrees. I have to have a better pedigree. And all these are notions. And those are wrong notions because of not knowing the I fully.
Mhm.
And that is what we call self ignorance.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that is what needs to be corrected.
Mhm. Mhm. So then we come to the other term in your title, which is self-sabotage. And you write in the book, however, it is important to note that many of these obstacles, and I put in to give it context, the obstacles to understanding oneself as limitless and free of sorrow. So, however, it is important to note that many of these obstacles are self-generated. To have this insight is a real blessing because if one is inadvertently setting up blocks to one's own liberation, then systematically dismantling them is also in one's own hands. So, this was a very important context for me to this word, this term that you use, self sabotage. And perhaps you could say a little bit more about why you thought that was important to include um, in the title of your book.
Yeah, I mean, the word sabotage means some kind of an ambush. And then when it is a self-sabotage, one is, you see, it's almost like there is an internal split within oneself. There is the student, there is the person who wants to know this, the person who wants to be one with that I, who is free of sorrow. There is the seeker. There is the one who is ready to do whatever it takes to understand this and drop the self ignorance. And then there is the rebellious one, the
Mm.
one who is identified with the ahankara, the I notion, the ego. And you know what that one wants to do? That one is pretty much happy being sad, if that makes any sense. That one is happy being querulous. That one is happy being afraid, because that's all this one knows. And so this one is constantly at loggerheads with the other one. This one is stuck and completely identified with the finite, everything that is finite, the body, the mind, the senses. It says, oh, it's all this is mind, 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 mind. And I will not, I will not, if I drop this, there is great fear that it will not be replaced by any of these promises, because the promises in the Bhagavad Gita, the promises in the Upanishads, I mean, how do I know that they will come true? This is what the other side says. And so there's a constant battle, and this is the inner Kurukshetra. This is the inner battle, which is exemplified in the Bhagavad Gita as the outer battle. So there is the inner child, better to name it inner brat or a series of inner brats. And then there is the seeker, the one that is the witness, the one that wants to study, the one that wants to know. And so this one, the one that is identified with the finite, is constantly trying to dismantle the pursuit because of its own small fears.
Right.
And that is so beautifully illustrated in the Chandogya Upanishad, one of the very important Upanishads, highly regarded. And there are two seekers who go to the teacher of teachers, Prajapati, and they have heard him say something wonderful. Atma apahata papma. This Atma, the self, is free of any kinds of omissions and commissions. No guilt, no fear, no regrets. And they just love it. And they just want to know more about it. And then who are these two people? One is Indra, the king of heaven, and the king of all the devas. And the other one is Virochana, the king of the demons. And so both of them set forth. And Prajapati does not teach. It is something to note. They live there for 33 years without even knowing why they are. They go to his ashram and they're just sitting there. And usually the student is supposed to approach the teacher and ask for this knowledge. But here they are just clueless. Finally, the teacher says, I have seen that you're here staying in the ashram for 33 years. What do you boys want? What do you gentlemen want? And then they say, oh, we heard you say this, etc., etc. We want to see the Atma. The Atma is you. It's not objectified. It is not an object. This is the mistake. This is one more misapprehension that people have. They want to experience the Atma as a special experience. It cannot be a special experience.
Right.
Everything that you experience is you. And any experience is actually dumb. It needs to be interpreted and understood. And if I understand that I am the content of the experiencer and also non separate from the object of experience and the means of knowing that which connects the experiencer with the experienced, that is freedom. That is the knowledge that we are talking about. But here there was no space to know this because they were just so much full of themselves. And Prajapati was not going to teach that person who was not, these people who were not prepared. And then so when they say, I want to see the Atma, he claps his hands and calls for a big vat of water to be brought. Gentlemen, behold the Atma. And they look in the water, they twirl their mustaches, they just look at their biceps and triceps and say, oh, this Atma is so handsome, it's wonderful. And thrilled, the demon goes away. And he opens a he opens a Gurukula where he teaches all the wrong things, that the body is the Atma. And then Indra also goes away because he thought, okay, my quest is finished. I got the answers. They both go away with the wrong understanding. But then, seeing them retreat, the teacher says, look at these fools who just went away with the surface level knowledge. May whoever teaches this, may that teaching never see the light of day because it would be wrong. But Indra, because he has a lot of meritorious deeds, he's after all a deva, comes back. He says, wait a minute, he's drinking some water on the way back from a creek. And he looks at himself and he says, oh, I'm so handsome. This Atma is wonderful. But then when he tries to put away the leaves, so puts aside the leaves to drink the water, the reflection is disturbed. And he says, Atma is supposed to be constant. I think I've been had. I have to go back. And he goes back by himself, and that's when the teaching begins. And so
Yes.
this is what the self-sabotage is.
Yes.
Warring things within oneself. And
Yes.
sometimes the side that has to just be given a pacifier and put to sleep, the inner child, who is very strong and it identifies with the I notion, and it fights and tooth and nail to protect the finite because
Hmm.
it doesn't know what the infinite is.
Yeah. Well, that was a great description, and certainly I've seen those tendencies in myself. The inner child or the inner brat, as you say. And Roy Davis, Yogacharya O'Brien's teacher, he would say, "People, do what you know you should do," which I thought
Yes,
was such a great saying. There is a part of us that knows what we are supposed to do, and yet do we always do it? No. So that is the struggle, and that is part of the self-sabotage that you talk about in your book.
yes,
So I wanted to ask you too about moksha, because in the teachings of both yoga and Vedanta, the goal of spiritual practice is this moksha, this liberation. And in Sanskrit, it means freedom from striving, freedom
yes,
from struggle.
yes,
And as we learned, as we've already talked about so far in this conversation, in the teachings of yoga and Vedanta, we already have this freedom. This freedom is already ours. We are already all that we seek. And there's even a mantra that was taught by Paramahansa Yogananda, the Soham mantra, which is again Sanskrit for I am that. I am that. Why do you think we have such trouble accepting this? And again, if it's freedom from struggle, it's kind of ironic that we keep striving. We keep
yes.
striving for freedom from struggle. Would you
Yes.
comment on that?
It's counterproductive to say the least, and it is funny when we are able to look at it objectively. It is extremely funny to be striving in order to not strive. And in
Sure.
fact, that is the subject matter of the Upanishads. How to not strive for
Yeah.
that which is already oneself. So the Upanishads talk about uh, letting go. First of all, they talk about these twin principles that become the corrective steps to this state of affairs. So, what are those twin principles? First is to discriminate. What is it that I want? I want permanence. And to distinguish between the permanent and the impermanent. Impermanent is everything else. Permanent is the I. That much one has to understand. And then the next step is to choose the permanent and let the quest of the impermanent drop. That is the dropping of the striving. That the first step is called viveka, discrimination. The second step is called vairagya, letting go,
Mhm. Mhm.
becoming more and more objective. And so
Mhm.
that's how we slowly make our way back equipped with these prerequisites for self knowledge. Because without these prerequisites, this teaching will constantly be sabotaged by those elements within oneself that are still yet to gain spiritual growth, inner maturity.
Mhm. Mhm. So, as a reminder for our listeners, today on the Yoga Hour, my guest is Swamini Svatmavidyananda. She's author of the book that we are discussing today, Overcoming Self-Sabotage and Self-Knowledge, Insights from the Upanishads. She is an esteemed teacher of Advaita Vedanta who teaches both nationally and internationally, and you can check out her website, arshavg.org, arsha, arshavg.org. You can also check out her YouTube channel, Svatma Vidyananda, Svatmavidyananda, Svatma Vidyananda. Those links will be on our web page, at theyogahour.com. We welcome your comments and questions. You can contact us via that website, theyogahour.com, or you can also sign up for our mailing list. So Swamini Ji, if I liked this. I liked this little example that you gave about we've been talking about striving and freedom from striving, and you write that striving to overcome striving is as futile as searching for your reading glasses that are already perched on top of your head.
Yes.
That's such a great. That's
Agree.
such a great image. So, what practices do the Upanishads recommend to help us deal? You already have said to use discrimination,
Yes.
viveka,
Yes.
and to let go, to focus on the permanent.
Yes. And to allow things to drop. We don't say one has to control the desires, because that's impossible. That's like herding cats. You can't do that. And we don't also say that, we talk more of desire management. It's a very, very important practice. And in the Bhagavad Gita, as you know, the desires are of two kinds: strong preferences called raga, and strong prejudices called dvesha.
Mhm.
So these are what have to be managed. Managing them means converting them from having having the ability to exert the pressure on the person for immediate fulfillment.
Mhm.
And that is what is management, so that you convert these desires from being binding desires that bind you to do things that are inimical to your growth. From binding desires, you convert them into non binding desires, which many desires fall into that category. You may say, oh, it's just, well, I would just love to have a piece of chocolate cake, but it's not available. And you say, it's okay, some other time. Many things are like that.
Mhm.
That's an example of a non binding desire. Whereas the binding desire makes one feel desperate because of the sheer identification with it as a way of one's well being.
That's
So, the
right.
management of these, and by converting the binding into non binding desires, is the key. I-
Mhm.
If you would you like me to talk a little more about how to do that?
Sure.
So this is, an easy way to do that is that when the binding desire strikes with all its force, it has a bite force, and then it bites, and then you feel discombobulated. We practice one easy way to let go of its hold is to practice deferred gratification.
Mhm.
If I tell myself I'm never going to have this, then I'll have three helpings of that. You see, that very thing that I should not, that I don't should not be having.
Right.
So we practice deferred gratification. I want it right now. No, let me do something. Let me fold the laundry, and then I'll come back and see what it is like. And then again, let me go for a walk and then see what it is like. And many
Mhm.
times when we change the channel and practice deferred gratification, the desire just goes away, at
That's
least
right.
for that day. And it goes away for that day because it's really not about the desire for that particular thing, but it is about a kind of a desperation which keeps attaching to various things that are around. And so
Mhm.
that is a very, very important practice of managing the desires rather than letting them manage you. In
Mhm.
the Kathopanishad, there is a wonderful analogy, as you know, of the chariot. The chariot allegory is there. And so the chariot has horses, and the chariot is this body. It's a wonderful allegory. And the passenger is in the chariot is oneself, and the driver is the guru, the inner guru,
Mhm.
and the horses are the sense organs given as they are to grazing in the field of the sense objects. The reins are the mind, and the guru is the buddhi, the intellect. And
Mhm.
so that this becomes the famous picture in the Bhagavad Gita of Arjuna turning back and Lord Krishna turning back and teaching Arjuna while holding the reins of the horses, aka the sense organs. This is a again an analogy for desire management.
Mhm. Mhm.
As long as the horses are in the hand, then you are driving the horses. They are not driving you.
Right. Yes, you talk in the book about this desire that you've been describing, this desire for instant gratification, which is difficult to manage, as you mentioned. And you also talked about FOMO, fear of missing out, which I thought was such an important thing to mention because there's so much that is driven now by social media, where you mentioned Facebook. People go on Facebook, and of course, if you're having a bad day, you don't post that on Facebook. You only post, the positive parts. And so lots of times we're identifying, our inner self, we're comparing our inner self with someone else's, outer self, which is never going to be, it's never going to work.
That's
So did
very
you
well put. That's wonderfully put. I like that. One's comparing one's own inner growth with what you see outside. That's a wonderful point that you have raised.
yeah. So did you want to say anything else about fear of missing out and maybe even, social media? We may need to have a little, a fast for part of the day from social media, or maybe a fast for, for a few days of social
A,
media.
a cyber fast.
Yes.
Yeah, and just like we practice with regard to the stomach, the latest trend is intermittent fasting, and we should do that with the devices as well. Absolutely. Because the more we are exposed to them, all these big trends, and everything becomes a trend. Everything becomes, what is that? Viral. Everything goes viral, and
That's
everything becomes a trend. And by the time you follow it, it's already gone. Something else has replaced it. And since there are many trends at the same time, there is FOMO. And this FOMO is dangerous because even when you land in the ashram of the best teacher in the whole world, still, even if Lord Brahmaji were to come and teach you, one would feel that, oh, maybe I'm missing out. Maybe Lord Shiva might be better. Maybe this one, or maybe I should try this out. One is not able to be at peace with oneself.
right.
This is the
Right.
problem.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this FOMO is dangerous because somehow, because of FOMO, I want to have the ability which the celestials had, we hear in the Puranic stories, of being able to be in many places at once. And this is just impossible because one has one particular body. So you can't do this. And that's why one feels worn out and exhausted, even with a spiritual quest. Once I went to a place near Atlanta, where there was every year this woman used to organize something, and then she had a friend and who used to come and help her. And so one year I go, and yes, everybody was there, but I didn't see the friend anywhere. So I asked my host, "Where is your friend? I mean, I see her all the time." And she laughed and she said, "This is very embarrassing, but she is swamied out because three swamis came before you. So she's kind of swamied out. Please forgive. This is what FOMO does." And poor thing, she wanted to go and listen to each and every person and help with organizing their talks or whatever it was. And then she was just completely exhausted. And this
Oh,
is
that's
where
so
we
funny.
are.
It's so funny. I've never heard that term before, swamied out. Um, so it does make me think about desires, though. And you quote the Bhagavad Gita in the book. You quote the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 23, which says, The one who is able to master the pressures born of desires and anger here in this world before giving up their body is a yogi and a happy person.
Yes.
Once again, the one who is able to master the pressures born of desires and anger here in this world before giving up their body is a yogi and a happy person. Well, so what of having desires on a, on while seeking spiritual awakening, on a spiritual path? It seems as though, as you said, we cannot rid ourselves of desires. How do we manage this?
We manage it by converting them into non-binding desires at first. So, and putting ourselves on a fast, in the sense that if there are 50 desires that I have today, let me just pursue 10 of them. And let me just pursue right now what I need. Let me not go into 10 years from now, what will I need? Let me just go take it one day at a time. This is the truth. We're dropping any addiction. This is one of the tenets of AA and all such groups. It's one day at a time.
Yeah,
So today I'm not going to do this. I don't know what I did yesterday, and I have no idea what I will do tomorrow. But today I'm going to be free of this, and and it is doable. It is doable. That much restraint one has some mastery, and if it is not doable, then we can break it up. Okay, half a day. Okay, half a day is also too much, maybe for certain very strong addictions. Okay, for 2 hours, I won't do this.
that's right.
So,
One
in
step at a
small,
time.
yes,
Yes.
small things, and there is a expression in Sanskrit which says, Alparambham Shreyaskaram, means small beginnings are very, very auspicious. Because if you
Mm,
begin with a big bang, you end up in a whimper. So small beginnings can grow and
mhm,
can be nurtured, and they are manageable. And uh, uh, that is what we practice, even with regard to these desires. And then it's also important to be able to look upon those addictions, addictive patterns, behaviors, and desires with kindness.
mm,
Self compassion is a powerful antidote to self sabotage.
mm. That's a lovely point there. Self-compassion is a lovely antidote to self-sabotage. That is very important.
It's a very powerful antidote to self sabotage because it takes away the teeth. There is
Yes,
nothing to fight there
yes,
because I'm loving it up. I'm saying, yes, this is out of my power. Yes, it
yes,
is here. So that brings in prayer. That's the next thing. It is
yes.
out of my hands. And so I seek an altar of surrender where I can take help, where I
Mm,
can lay all these things in the lap of the Almighty,
mhm,
however I may address him or her.
mhm, mhm. Yes, indeed. It reminded me of when we start on the spiritual path, one of the difficulties is that as we become more aware, for example, of our inner processes, we become aware, it's almost like things get better. I mean, get worse before they get better. We become
Yes,
more aware. It's like, oh, I have all of these thoughts that are painful, and it's almost overwhelming, right? Because they don't stop. And so that idea of self-compassion being a tool of to remove self-sabotage, I think is so important because then you get caught up, if you become sort of fixated on or you're more aware of these negative traits in ourselves, it's very easy to get very down on ourselves, but that's another form of attachment. That's
yes,
another form of looking at what is temporary and
yes,
getting attached to what's temporary. So this
yes,
idea of self-compassion, I think, is extremely important.
yes. You have
Nice.
put it very well.
Yeah. Thank you. In your book, you share that the opening mantra of the Isha Upanishad says that everything in the universe, starting with our bodies and minds, is pervaded by Ishvara. And you go on to say that the Upanishads emphasize the salience of the body and mind in pursuit of self knowledge. And again, as we've talked about, the body and mind are changeable. So,
Yes,
and yet we are, pursuing self-knowledge, knowledge of ourselves as that unchangeable part. So would you say more about this?
yes, it's you have got, you have landed on an important paradox in Vedanta. Vedanta is a series of paradoxes, and this one happens to be one of them. How to make the changing serve the changeless, serve the pursuit that is changeless. So the changing body, the changing mind, I mean, it is here. The human body is here for a specific purpose. It is here as a tool for moksha. That is its only purpose.
Mm.
And on the way, you can enjoy many things, but its primary purpose is to have freedom from self-loath, self-judgment, self-critique. That is what moksha is. And so therefore, when I use this body for that pursuit, in the service of this pursuit, then actually it's the correct use of the body. So that's why the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, all of them, they first discuss how to make this, convert this body from being a bhoga sharira to a yoga sharira, being a bhogi to a yogi. That is the journey. Bhogi means a conspicuous consumer. Like, I want that, I want that, give me this, give me this, give me more, 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 more. Yogi means the one who is wanting to join the heart with Ishvara, a devotee, a sadhaka, a practitioner, a seeker. That is what yogi is, the one who wants this union. So
Mhm.
that is the journey. That is the journey of yoga, Vedanta, everything. So it's a journey, as I say, from ho hum to so hum. That is what. So if I use the body for some other purpose, it is ho hum after a while. Every relationship, ho hum. Every possession that I have, ho hum. Every accomplishment, ho hum. Ho
That's
hum
right.
is boring. So hum is you. So hum
Mhm,
is Ishvara.
mhm, mhm,
Soham is I am he. You can also say Saham, I am she. It's a nice
mhm,
change.
mhm. Very nice. Very nice. So, since I have you here on the show, I did want to mention one of my favorite spiritual quotes, which is from the Isha Upanishad, which is about fullness. All of this is full, all that is full. When fullness comes from fullness, fullness remains. And there's something to me that is so calming about this idea. Did you want to comment on that verse?
Yes, it's wonderful. Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. Adaha means that. That means which I cannot objectify, which is remote, apparently from the standpoint of the person who is a seeker, feels remote. That Ishvara, that self, that. And this means that which I see as an effect. So everything that I refer to as this has indeed come from that. And
Mhm,
that is limitless. And so this also shares the DNA of Satchidananda with that.
mhm,
That is why this is full, and that's why you can that's why this verse were very important shanti mantra of the Ishavasya Upanishad reminds us to not get into a place of dissociation, which is very common in spiritual pursuit. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the senses, and then you're just floating around somewhere. This is your choice. And
True.
and then you have this body, but then one wants to have an out of body experience, whatever that means. And so here, the when you say everything is whole and limitless, the way it is best translated is to say the body is me, but I am much more than this body. I'm
Mhm.
not this body, but the body is me. Body is I. Body is Atma. Body is Ishvara. Ishvara is not the body. Mind is Ishvara. Ishvara is not the mind.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this is kind of a partial negation, and that stops the alienation in its tracks, and that reverses any kind of disconnection and dissociation that I may have.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's
Well,
why the verse is so beautiful.
yeah. Well, thank you. I think that that is. I love hearing your further commentary on it. There is something about this idea of fullness has already come from fullness, right? And yet fullness remains. I don't know. There's something that
Yes.
I just love about that. It's very reassuring to me somehow. And wholeness, it's wholeness has always been such an important goal for
Yeah.
me. And so I think that's this is speaking of that. And your book speaks to that, our true nature as that wholeness, that oneness. So so thank you for that. We've almost come to the end of our time together. What words of encouragement or inspiration would you like to leave with our listeners?
I would say you are wonderful. Be yourself. That is what I would say. It is easy to be oneself. Being oneself means letting go of any inauthenticity that one may have gathered
Mhm.
in the course of one's day, in the course of life, mistakenly thinking that this inauthenticity is going to make me more whole.
Mhm.
So we backtrack from that. Be oneself.
Mhm.
Oh, but what if I make mistakes? Make many mistakes. Make new mistakes every day. Not the old ones. The old ones we learn. But make new mistakes because the mistakes are a gateway to knowledge and
Right,
wisdom.
right. That's beautiful. You've been listening to the